They say selling your husband's war medals is a betrayal, but what she sold wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a secret the government buried for 30 years. And the man who bought it for spare change was the only person on Earth who knew what it truly meant. This is the story of Sergeant First Class David Vance, a decorated Army Ranger who spent 27 years believing his most painful chapter was closed. And it's the story of his wife, Marion, who saw his shadow box of honors not as sacred keepsakes, but as a quick cash grab at a pawn shop. But when the buyer turned out to be General James Holloway, the man who once commanded Vance's unit, a simple act of betrayal became a federal investigation. Because one of those medals wasn't just classified, its very existence was a state secret, and the general knew that if Vance's wife had it, she had access to far more than a jewelry box. David Vance's war didn't end in the mountains of Afghanistan. It followed him home to a quiet suburban street in Dayton, Ohio, and settled in the spare bedroom closet in a polished wooden case. Inside were the physical echoes of a lifetime of service, an Army Commendation Medal, a Bronze Star with Valor device, a Purple Heart for the shrapnel that still aches when it rains. And then there was the one he never spoke about. The one with no official name, just a serial number and a blank space on his official record, replaced by a line that simply read, "Award withheld, classification pending." He called it his ghost. For 27 years, Sergeant First Class David Vance lived by a simple, unbreakable rule. You don't talk about the ghost. Not to your buddies, not to the VA, and especially not to your wife. Marion knew he had been on some secret missions. She knew he had nightmares. She did not know that the unusual silver star with the strange, layered emblem in his case was proof of an operation so sensitive. Its very acknowledgement was a felony. To her, after 2 decades of marriage strained by his silence and their mounting debt, it was just another piece of metal. Their financial situation was a slow bleed. Vance's pension was modest. His body was too broken for consistent construction work, and the medical bills from his service-connected injuries were a constant weight. Marion had taken a bookkeeping job that she hated. The tension in the house was a third occupant, silent and heavy. Then in early October, their water heater failed. The repair quote was $800 they did not have. And that's when Marion Vance looked at her husband's shadow box, hanging on the wall like a shrine to a past that paid no bills, and she saw a solution. She waited for a day when David was at a prolonged VA appointment. She took the box down, her hands steady. She carefully pried the medals from their mounts, the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and yes, the strange silver one. She did not look up the laws she was breaking. She did not know that under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 704, selling these specific medals is a federal crime punishable by up to a year in prison. She drove to a pawn shop 3 towns over, a place called Quick Cash Gold and Maury, and she placed the medals on the counter. The clerk, a man in his 20s with a neck tattoo, barely glanced at them. "Military stuff, huh? Doesn't move great. I can give you $75 for the lot. $75 for a Purple Heart, for a Bronze Star earned in blood, for a secret the government spent millions to bury." Marion Vance took the cash. Meanwhile, retired General James Holloway had a hobby that baffled his former aides. Every other Thursday, he visited pawn shops and military surplus stores. Not to buy, but to watch. As the former commander of Joint Special Operations Command, he had spent a career tracking shadows and patterns. He knew that stolen valor, and worse, stolen evidence of valor, often surfaced in these places. It was a personal crusade. On that same October afternoon, he walked into Quick Cash Gold and Maury. He was about to leave when a flash of silver in a dusty display case caught his expert eye. He moved closer, and his blood went cold. There, nestled between old class rings and a broken watch, was a medal he had only seen once before, in a sealed briefing folder over 2 decades ago. It was the so-called Star of Anvil, an award created for a single, aborted black operation in the early 90s, so classified that every record of it was meant to be purged. Only 12 were ever minted. Only 6 were ever awarded. And by orders from the highest level, they were all to have been destroyed. Seeing it here in a pawn shop was not just impossible, it was a catastrophic security breach. Holloway's mind, trained for tactical assessment, shifted into overdrive. If this medal was here, then the recipient was either dead or someone had gained access to his most guarded possessions. He bought it and the others for $200. He didn't haggle. In his car, he examined the Purple Heart. Engraved on the back was a name, David J. Vance, a name he remembered. a young, fiercely competent Ranger sergeant who had been part of that buried operation. Holloway spent the next 48 hours doing what he did best, assembling a picture from fragments. He pulled old, redacted files from memory. He made quiet calls to contacts still in the system. He learned that Vance was alive, living in Ohio, and that his wife, Marion, had recently made several large cash deposits to a joint bank account, each under $1,000 to avoid reporting. The pattern was clear. This wasn't just a theft. It was a systematic liquidation, and General James Holloway faced a choice. He could call the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and have Marion Vance arrested by sundown, or he could go to the man whose honor was being sold off for spare change and look him in the eye. He chose the latter. He drove to Dayton. He found David Vance sitting on the porch of his modest home, staring at nothing. The general approached and without a word placed the shadow box on the porch step between them. Vance looked at it. He looked at the general. The recognition was instant, and the dawning horror on the veteran's face was worse than any battlefield wound. Marion was all he could say, and General Holloway delivered the blow that would end David Vance's world as he knew it. "Sergeant," he said, his voice low and grave, "I'm afraid this is just the beginning. Your wife didn't just sell your medals. She's been selling your identity to people you really don't want knowing your name, and they've been paying a lot more than $75. The porch light flickered on, throwing harsh shadows across David Vance's face. The word identity hung in the air like gunpowder. He stared at General Holloway, the man who had once been a distant legend on a briefing slide, now standing in his driveway holding the shattered pieces of his life. "What people?" Vance asked, his voice barely a whisper. Holloway didn't answer with words. He opened a folder he'd brought, placing it on the shadow box. Inside were bank statements, screenshots from a laptop, and grainy photographs of men David had never seen. "Your wife opened a safety deposit box 9 months ago," Holloway began, his tone clinical, detached from the horror it conveyed. "Not in her name, in the name of a Shell LLC. Inside, we believe she placed photocopies of your DD-214 service record, your separation paperwork, your military ID, and your social security card. She then began selling access." Vance felt the porch boards tilt under his feet. The general continued, tracing a timeline with his finger. A deposit of $2,000 in March, coinciding with a trip Marion took to Cincinnati to visit a cousin he'd never met. Another deposit of $5,000 in July after she claimed to have won a small lottery. The amounts grew and the excuses grew thinner. But the most damning piece was a photograph taken from a traffic camera showing Marion at a diner booth with a man whose face was partially obscured. Holloway tapped the image. "This is Alexei Rudenko, former GRU, now a freelance broker for sensitive information. He has a particular interest in Western Special Operations personnel, especially those with gaps in their service history." The air left David's lungs. Gaps, the ghost, the operation that never happened. Marion hadn't just sold his medals. She had auctioned a key to the one door the US government had welded shut, and she'd done it while he slept in the next room. "Why?" was the only word he could form. Holloway's expression softened just a fraction. "The bank foreclosed on a second mortgage she took out against the house last year. She never told you. She was trying to fix it before you found out. Rudenko's people approached her at the bank. They offered a way out." Inside the house, a television glowed blue in the living room window. Marion was in there, oblivious. David Vance, the soldier who had navigated minefields, now had to cross his own living room. He turned and opened the front door. The confrontation that followed was not loud. It was the quiet unraveling of 2 decades. David placed the shadow box on the coffee table. He didn't ask. He stated, "You sold my ghost, Marion." She looked from the box to his face, and the color drained from hers. She didn't deny it. She broke. The story spilled out in choked sobs, the threatening letters from the bank, the shame, the desperation. The man in the diner who said he was a collector, who asked innocent questions about David's old unit, who then offered cash for mementos. It started small, a copy of a deployment photo, then a page from an old logbook. Then, when the bank's final notice arrived, the medals. She claimed she never knew who Alexei Rudenko really was. She claimed she thought she was selling to a harmless history buff. David listened, and a terrible cold clarity settled over him. His wife was either a masterful liar or profoundly naive, and he no longer knew which was worse. General Holloway, who had waited tactically on the porch, entered then. He addressed Marion not as a betrayed husband would, but as an investigator. "Mrs. Vance, the man you met is a known intelligence operative. He isn't collecting history. He's building a target package. Your husband is now a person of extreme interest to a very hostile foreign service. They will want to know everything about that medal, and they will use whatever means necessary to get it. The reality of what she'd done finally crashed over her. This wasn't about money or marital secrets anymore. This was about treason. At that moment, David Vance made a decision. The soldier in him overrode the husband. He turned to General Holloway. "Sir, what are our orders?" He was back in the chain of command. Holloway nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the transition. "We contain, we counter, and we draw them out." The plan was audacious. They would use Marion's existing contact with Rudenko. They would dangle the one thing he wanted most, the full, unredacted story behind the Star of Anvil medal, straight from the soldier who earned it. They would offer a meeting. Vance would play the role of a disgruntled, cash-strapped veteran willing to talk. The FBI's counterintelligence division was quietly looped in. A safe house was established. David moved out, telling the neighbors he was helping an old army buddy with a construction project. The stage was set for a sting operation that would hopefully net Rudenko and expose his network. But here's the thing about secrets: they never exist in a vacuum. While the FBI set up surveillance on the designated meet location, a secluded fishing cabin on Lake Erie, a separate, darker machine was already in motion. Alexei Rudenko was not working alone. He was a contractor for a unit within a foreign intelligence apparatus that had a very specific and very old file on Operation Anvil. They weren't just curious. They were validating a 30-year-old rumor, and they had a source much closer to home than anyone suspected. 2 days before the staged meeting, General Holloway received a secure call from a contact in the Pentagon. The message was cryptic and chilling. "The bird has left the nest. Repeat, the bird has left the nest. Abort all contact." It was a warning from inside the intelligence community. Someone had tipped off Rudenko's handlers. The sting was compromised. But who? The circle was impossibly tight. Holloway, Vance, a handful of FBI agents, and Marion, who was under 24-hour watch at the safe house. The leak couldn't have come from their side, unless their side was much bigger than they thought. Holloway and Vance met in a bland hotel room, maps and burner phones between them. The general's face was granite. "This goes higher than a pawn shop, Sergeant. Someone in the system has been watching for this medal to surface for a very long time. They didn't just buy information from your wife, they were waiting for her." The revelation reframed everything. Marion wasn't the catalyst, she was a tool. Her financial desperation was merely a convenient opening. The target had always been David Vance and the secret he carried. The classified medal wasn't just a souvenir of a buried mission. It was a key, and David, for the first time, voiced the terrifying question. "Sir, what was Operation Anvil, really?" "They told us it was a reconnaissance mission that got scrapped. They gave us the medal and told us to forget it. But if all this is happening now, what did we actually do?" General Holloway looked old in the cheap hotel light. He had helped bury Anvil. Now he had to dig it up. "You didn't just go to observe, son. You went to eliminate." The target was a rogue Soviet biochemist who had defected to the West, then decided to sell his work to the highest bidder. Your team was sent to clean up a friendly nation's mistake. It was a direct action, and it went wrong. The target was killed, but so were 2 local agents. The political fallout would have shattered an alliance, so we buried it. We buried the mission, the medals, and the men who carried them out. He leaned forward. But the biochemist's research notes were never found. Our intelligence suggested they were hidden. The code to the location was said to be split among the members of the team. "Your medal, Sergeant, it isn't just an award. It's one piece of a map. And the people coming for you don't want your story. They want the coordinates you've been carrying for 30 years without knowing it." The room spun. Every nightmare, every flashback, every silent toast to his dead teammates, it all had a shape now, and the shape was a treasure map written in blood. David Vance had spent his life guarding a secret he didn't understand. And now a foreign power and potentially a traitor within his own government were hunting him for it. His wife's betrayal had simply lit the fuse. As they absorbed this, the burner phone on the table buzzed. It was the FBI handler. His voice was strained. "We have a problem. Marion Vance is gone. She slipped her detail at the safe house. She left a note." David took the phone. "What did it say?" The handler's silence was heavy. "It says, 'I'm sorry, David. I'm going to fix this my way.' I know where he is." She was going to meet Rudenko alone. She was walking into a trap with a secret she couldn't possibly comprehend, to bargain for a life she'd already destroyed. and she was taking the only leverage they had straight into the hands of the enemy. For a long moment, David Vance just stared at the dead air of the burner phone. His wife was gone. The woman who had betrayed him was now walking into a den of wolves, armed with nothing but guilt and a dangerous half-truth. General Holloway was already moving, grabbing his coat. We have to assume Rudenko's people are monitoring her phone. If they are, they know the safe house is compromised. They'll change the meat. David's mind, trained for chaos, locked onto a single point of clarity. She doesn't know where he is. The note said she knew, but she doesn't. She's going to the only place she's ever met him, the diner. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only thread they had. They raced to Holloway's car, leaving the compromised hotel behind. The Riverside Diner was a 24-hour greasy spoon on the edge of town, all neon and chrome. From a parked surveillance van 2 blocks away, 2 bleary-eyed FBI agents confirmed Marion had arrived 10 minutes prior. She was sitting in the same booth alone, nursing a coffee. There was no sign of Rudenko. Holloway and Vance slipped into the van. The atmosphere was tense. The lead agent, a woman named Chavez, shook her head. She's clean, no tail we can see. Rudenko, a no-show. He spooked. David watched his wife's grainy image on the monitor. She looked small, terrified, and utterly out of her depth. The soldier in him warred with the husband. She had caused this, but she was still his. Then Marion's phone lit up on the table. She answered, her body language shifting to a desperate plea. The audio feed crackled to life. "You didn't come," she said. A male voice, accented and calm, replied, "Plans change, Mrs. Vance. You have been busy. Your friends in the FBI are not subtle, but your initiative is interesting. You wish to fix things. I have what you want," Marion whispered, her voice trembling. "I have my husband. He'll tell you everything about the medal, everything. Just leave us alone after." There was a soft chuckle on the line. "You misunderstand. We do not want his story. We want his peace, and you will bring it to us. A new location. Come alone. Tell no one. Or we will find your daughter at college and ask her instead." The line went dead. Marion sat frozen, then frantically began writing on a napkin. David's heart turned to ice. Their daughter Sarah was a sophomore at Ohio State. She knew nothing of any of this. Rudenko had just expanded the battlefield. This was the wait, it gets worse moment. The betrayal was no longer just about money or secrets. It was a direct threat to their child. Marion left the diner, the napkin clutched in her hand. She drove erratically, heading not to a new location, but back toward her own home. The surveillance team followed, confused. Holloway's eyes narrowed. She's not following instructions, she's panicking. David knew that look on her face. It was the same look she had when her father died, a spiral of grief and poor decisions. "She's going for the medal," David said, the realization dawning. "The real one, I have it, not in the shadow box. I hid it years ago." He had never told a soul. After receiving the Star of Anvil, a deep-seated instinct made him create a decoy for the display case and seal the real medal inside a length of PVC pipe buried beneath his backyard tool shed. He had just never gotten around to moving it. Marion must have seen him bury something out there years ago and guessed. She was going to dig it up and trade it for Sarah's safety. They had to get there first. Holloway coordinated with the FBI. A tactical team was dispatched to set a perimeter around the Vance property. But as they converged, a black sedan with tinted windows cruised slowly past the house and parked a block away. Rudenko hadn't abandoned the original asset. He was watching her house, waiting to see who she led him to. The operation was now a three-way standoff. Marion, the FBI, and a hostile intelligence team, all converging on a buried secret in a suburban backyard. David and Holloway arrived at a neighbor's house, using it as an observation post. Through binoculars, they watched Marion run to the tool shed, grab a shovel, and start digging frantically in the soft dirt. She was crying. The shovel strikes wild and uneven. She hit the pipe within minutes. As she pulled it from the ground, the back door of the black sedan opened. Two men got out. They moved with a casual, confident stride toward the backyard fence. They were not rushing. They knew they had her. Agent Chavez's voice came over the radio. "We have 2 tangos approaching. We can take them now." Holloway held up a hand. "Wait, let them take the package. We need to see the handoff to their controller. We need the whole network." It was the cold calculus of counterintelligence. Marion was bait. David's jaw tightened, but he didn't object. The soldier understood. The husband wanted to scream. The 2 men vaulted the low fence. Marion saw them and froze, clutching the muddy PVC pipe to her chest. There was a brief, silent exchange. One man held out his hand. The other kept a watchful eye on the street. Marion handed over the pipe. The man unscrewed a cap, shook out the medal, examined it with a small UV light and nodded. Then instead of leaving, he spoke. "Your husband, where is he?" Marion shook her head. "I don't know." The man smiled, a thin, cruel thing. "He will come for you, we will wait." They weren't just after the medal, they were after David. They intended to take them both. This was the capture, the revelation stacked upon the last. Rudenko's goal was never just information, it was the asset himself, David Vance, the living key. That moment, David's own burner phone vibrated. An unknown number, he answered. A new voice, American, calm and chillingly familiar, came on the line. "Sergeant Vance, this is Colonel John Riggs, retired. I was your air support controller on Operation Anvil. I think it's time we talk, don't you?" David's blood ran cold. Riggs, he hadn't heard that name in 30 years. He was listed as killed in action when their extraction helicopter went down. "You're supposed to be dead," David breathed. "The report was exaggerated," Riggs said. "I've been working in private sector security for a long time, and I've been keeping an eye on you. I'm the one who tipped off General Holloway that your sting was compromised. I'm trying to help you, son, because the people who have your wife don't just want the medal's secret. They want to kill you and anyone else who was on that team. They've been cleaning house for decades. I'm next on the list. And so are you." The ground shifted again. The enemy wasn't just a foreign intelligence service. It was a ghost from their own past, a supposed friend working with them. Or was he? Holloway grabbed the phone. "Riggs, this is Holloway. What's your play?" "My play, General, is survival," Riggs replied. "I have the third piece of the map." The biochemist hid his research in a diplomatic pouch that was lost in the chaos. It's been sitting in a customs warehouse in Poland for 30 years. The code to claim it is split 3 ways. Vance has one piece in his medal. I have another. The third was with the team medic, who really did die in that crash. But his piece, I believe your wife just handed it to the wrong people. The medal wasn't the map. It was a key to a locker. The medal's unique serial number was 1/3 of a customs claim code. The pieces were coming together, and the prize was a bioweapon formula lost to time. Holloway made a decision. "We are moving, now." He gave the signal to the FBI team. Agents erupted from concealment, shouting, "FBI, down on the ground." The 2 men in the backyard reacted with terrifying speed. One threw the PVC pipe like a javelin over the fence to a third accomplice in a getaway car they hadn't spotted. The other drew a pistol and fired toward the house, not at the agents, but at the window where Marion stood. A suppression shot. Glass shattered. Marion screamed and dropped to the floor. David saw red. He was out the neighbor's door and sprinting across the 2 front lawns before Holloway could stop him. He wasn't following orders. He was saving his wife. Chaos erupted. The getaway car screeched away with the medal. One of the men in the yard was tackled by agents. The other, the shooter, turned his weapon on David. David didn't break stride. He'd run toward gunfire before. He tackled the man at the knees, driving him into the dirt. The gun skittered away. They wrestled, a brutal, silent fight in the grass. David was older, but he was fueled by a primal rage. He got an arm around the man's neck and squeezed until he went limp. He looked up, searching for Marion. She was being pulled from the house by an agent, unharmed but in shock. Their eyes met across the yard. In hers, he saw a lifetime of regret. And then the getaway car, which had circled the block, came speeding back down the street. Its passenger window rolled down. The barrel of a rifle emerged. They were coming back to finish the job, to tie up the loose end that was David Vance. General Holloway's voice boomed across the yard. "Vance, down!" David threw himself over Marion as a burst of automatic fire chewed up the lawn where he had just been standing. The FBI team returned fire. The car swerved and accelerated away, disappearing into the night. In the sudden, ringing silence, David Vance held his weeping wife. They had the medal, they had a piece of the code, and they had just declared open war. David looked at Holloway, his face set in a grim mask. "We're not waiting for them to come back for Sarah," he said. "We are taking this to them. We're going to find that research before they do, and we're going to use Colonel Riggs to do it." The hunted was now the hunter. The final play was about to begin. The plan was built on a foundation of ghosts and lies. They would use Colonel Riggs as the bait and the bridge. Riggs claimed he could arrange a meet with a broker in Warsaw who could access the customs warehouse. The price, the 2 remaining pieces of the code, Vance's medal serial number and Riggs's piece. They would trade them for the research, then immediately have the broker arrested by Polish authorities working with the CIA. It was clean, surgical, and felt like a trap. General Holloway voiced the concern they all shared. Riggs has been off the grid for 30 years. He surfaces now offering help when his own life is in danger. He's either desperate or he's the one setting the board. David Vance, standing in a secure FBI office, looked at the two people who now defined his world, his wife pale and silent under guard and the general. We don't have a choice. If that research gets out, it's not just my family at risk. It's a lot of families. The decision was made. They were going to Poland. Marion was to remain in protective custody. As David prepared to leave, she asked to speak to him alone. In a barren interview room, she faced him. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She handed him a folded piece of paper. I wrote down everything, every meeting, every word Rudenko said, every deposit. I thought I was saving our home. I was just building my own prison. David took the paper. After a long moment, he said the only thing left. When I get back, we will figure out what after looks like, but you have to testify, you have to help put them away. She nodded, tears in her eyes. It was a thread of a future, thin and frayed, but it was there. The operation moved with dizzying speed. Within 72 hours, David Vance and General Holloway, under false identities, landed in Warsaw. They were met by a CIA liaison and taken to a safe apartment. Colonel John Riggs was already there. He was a gaunt man in his 60s with the watchful eyes of a predator. The reunion was not warm. Riggs shook Holloway's hand, then looked at Vance. Sergeant, you look like hell. You look alive, Colonel, David replied. For now. Riggs laid out the details. The broker was a former Polish intelligence officer named Kaczmarek. He had access to the long-term storage section of a bonded warehouse near the airport. The diplomatic pouch from 1991 was there, listed under a false shipping manifest. The meet was set for the next day. They would exchange the codes for the pouch. The CIA had the warehouse surrounded. It was supposed to be simple. But David Vance's instincts, honed over a lifetime of things going wrong, were screaming. As Riggs talked, David noticed something. The colonel's hands were perfectly steady, but his left thumb kept rubbing a small, almost invisible scar on his right forefinger. A nervous tell. He was hiding something. That night, David did what he'd been trained to do. He followed the thread. Using a secure laptop provided by the CIA, he cross-referenced the details Riggs had given about the warehouse with aerial maps and old logistical records from the early 90s, and he found a discrepancy. The warehouse Riggs had pinpointed wasn't built until 1993. The pouch went missing in 1991. It couldn't be there. Confronting Riggs alone was a risk, but David took it. He found the colonel on the apartment's small balcony, smoking. The warehouse is wrong, David said without preamble. Riggs didn't flinch. He took a long drag, then exhaled slowly. I wondered if you'd catch it. You were always the smart one on the ground. He turned, his face grim. The pouch isn't in a warehouse, Vance. It's in a private vault under a bank in the city center. Owned by a shell corporation that traces back to Alexei Rudenko's employers. They've had it for 15 years. They just couldn't open it. The trap was now clear. Riggs wasn't helping them. He was delivering them. The meet with Kaczmarek was a setup to get David and Holloway in one place, where Rudenko's team could take them alive and force them to give up their code pieces. Riggs had been working for the other side for a long, long time. He was the inside man, the leak, and the architect. David moved fast. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply said, "They're holding your family, aren't they?" Riggs's composure cracked, a flicker of raw pain. "My daughter. They took her 6 months ago. They said they'd send her back in pieces if I didn't help them clean up the last of Anvil." It was the final, terrible twist. The enemy wasn't just using greed or ideology. They were using a father's love mirroring David's own nightmare. David made a decision. We can still get her back. But you have to flip. Now, he laid out a counterplan. They would go to the meet, but they would bring the full weight of the CIA down on Rudenko's entire Warsaw cell, and they would do it before the exchange, using Riggs to draw them into the open. General Holloway, when told, agreed instantly. The CIA liaison scrambled assets. The next morning, Riggs, wired for sound and shadowed by a dozen agents, went to the original meet location. Kaczmarek was there with 2 armed guards. Riggs, following the script, insisted the Americans were nervous and wanted to do the exchange at a secondary location, a location the CIA had already locked down. The bait was taken. Kaczmarek and his team, along with Alexei Rudenko, who appeared from a nearby car, moved to the new site, an abandoned textile factory. They brought Riggs's daughter, a terrified young woman, with them. It was all or nothing. The assault was swift and violent. Polish counterterrorism units, supported by CIA, hit the factory from multiple points. In the chaos, David Vance went straight for the vault room Rudenko had set up as the exchange point. He found Rudenko trying to escape through a back tunnel, a briefcase in his hand. The two men fought, a brutal, close-quarters struggle. David was older, but rage and training won out. He subdued Rudenko, securing the briefcase. Inside was the original diplomatic pouch, sealed for 30 years. And next to it, in a clear plastic bag, was the Star of Anvil medal. Outside, the firefight ended. Kaczmarek was dead. Riggs's daughter was safe. Colonel Riggs, in the final moments, had thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for a CIA operative. He died on the factory floor, his last words to David being, "Get it to the burn pit, burn it all." Back in the States, the aftermath was a quiet storm. The research in the pouch was handed over to a joint US-EU biosecurity task force for controlled destruction. Alexei Rudenko was renditioned to a black site for interrogation, his network rolled up across Europe. The story of the stolen medals, however, became public. Marion Vance, under a plea agreement, testified against the financial middlemen in Rudenko's network. She was sentenced to 3 years probation and 6 months of home confinement for violating the Stolen Valor Act, her cooperation and duress mitigating the sentence. The VA provided David with a full review of his benefits, and the back pay from several incorrectly denied claims cleared the mortgage debt. But the final, surprising detail came from General Holloway. A month after returning home, he visited David. He brought with him a small official box. The Department of the Army conducted a review, Holloway said. Operation Anvil has been declassified, at least enough for this. He opened the box. Inside was a new Star of Anvil medal, properly engraved and accompanied by a citation that detailed, in vague but honorable terms, service in defense of national security. It was no longer a ghost. It was recognized. It doesn't exist in any public record, Holloway said, but you have the right to wear it. And more importantly, your grandchildren will have the right to know you earned it. David Vance took the medal. He didn't put it in a shadow box. He placed it in a safe deposit box next to his will, a secret for his daughter to be opened when he was gone. He and Marion lived separately for a year, attending counseling, piecing together fragments of trust. They never fully regained what was lost, but they built something new, careful, and honest. General Holloway continued his pawn shop patrols, his quiet crusade now backed by a formal liaison with the Veterans Administration. The last scene is this. David Vance, on a sunny afternoon, stands at his backyard grill. His daughter Sarah is home, laughing with her mother. The general is there too, drinking a beer and arguing about tomatoes. The ghost is buried. The map is destroyed. The medal is safe. And the man who went to war to protect secrets finally learned that some things are meant to be kept and others are meant to be shared. He had done both. The fight was over. So what does it mean when the price of honor is calculated in spare change? The story of David Vance and his medals is more than a tale of betrayal and espionage. It's a stark reminder that the things we value most, loyalty, memory, sacrifice, exist in a world that puts a dollar value on everything. A world where a pawn shop clerk can look at a Purple Heart and see $75 of scrap metal, where a desperate spouse can see a way out of debt instead of a lifetime of service, and where a foreign agent can see a key to a 30-year-old secret. These worlds collided because one person forgot that some things aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be kept, or they're meant to be given, but they are never meant to be traded. General Holloway's quiet crusade continues because the David Vances of the world are everywhere. Veterans who came home with more than medals, they came home with secrets, with pain, and with a legacy that is too easily exploited. The law against selling these medals isn't just about preserving metal. It's about preserving meaning. It's about saying that the value of what someone did in the dark, for all of us, cannot be reduced to a pawn ticket. But laws only work when people understand why they exist. When families understand that the shadow box in the hall isn't just decoration. It's a chapter of history written in blood and bravery. And what of Marion Vance? Her story is the cautionary tale. In trying to save a house, she almost destroyed a family and endangered a nation. Her punishment was probation, but her real sentence is living with the knowledge of what her choices almost cost. Their marriage, fractured but not broken, is a testament to the hardest work of all, rebuilding trust after the unthinkable. Sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought overseas. They're fought at kitchen tables and in quiet bedrooms, with the ghosts of the past as the only witnesses. David Vance tends his tomatoes now without looking over his shoulder. The ghost is laid to rest. The medal is secure. But the question lingers: how many other secrets are sitting in attics and basements, just one financial crisis away from being sold? How many other wives or children, facing a broken water heater or a stack of bills, might see a solution where they should see a sacrament? The line between desperation and betrayal is thinner than we like to admit. That's why stories like this matter. They're not just entertainment, they're a mirror. They ask us what we value and what we would do to protect it. They remind us that honor isn't a passive thing. It's a living, breathing commitment that extends beyond the battlefield and into the quiet of everyday life. It's in the choice to remember, to respect, and to protect the legacy of those who served. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the unseen sacrifices that surround us, then do us a genuine favor. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that these real, raw human stories are worth sharing. And if you haven't already, subscribe. We explore the hidden corners of duty, sacrifice, and the quiet battles fought long after the war is over. There are more stories like this waiting, and we'd love for you to be here for them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering.